The Great Hall of Kethver was silent. 12 species had sent their leaders to this meeting, and all of them sat waiting for High Arbiter Zolthan to speak. The Velthari were the most powerful race in the known galaxy. They had conquered world after world for thousands of years. No one had ever said no to them until now. Zolthan's body glowed with a soft blue light. This was how the Velthari showed their emotions. Blue meant he was calm, but everyone in the room knew that would change soon. He held up a small device and pressed a button. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a small planet covered in green and brown patches. "This is New Kansas," Zolthan said. "A human colony on the edge of their territory. 3 generations ago, this world was nothing but rock and poison air. The humans changed it. They made it livable. Now 8 million of them call it home." One of the other leaders, a creature with 4 arms and gray skin, leaned forward. "Why do we care about this small world?" "Because we told the humans to give it to us," Zolthan replied. "We told them to pay tribute like every other species. We told them to accept our rule." He paused. His glow shifted from blue to orange. This meant anger. They said no. Whispers filled the room. No one said no to the Velthari. It simply did not happen. The last species to refuse had been wiped out completely. Their planet was now a mining colony. Commander Vorik stood up from his seat. He was tall even for a Velthari, with sharp edges on his body that looked like natural armor. He had led dozens of conquests and never lost a single battle. "Let me take the Crimson Legion," he said. 2,000 of our best warriors. We will crush these humans and make an example of them. The other species will see what happens when anyone refuses us." Zolthan nodded slowly. "The humans have no real military. They are farmers and builders. This should be simple." Far away, on the colony world of New Kansas, Captain Danny Holt stood on the observation deck of an orbital station. He was a tall man with tired eyes and gray starting to show in his brown hair. He had joined the Colonial Defense Force 20 years ago, thinking he would never see real combat. The human colonies had been at peace for a long time. That peace was about to end. Lieutenant Maria Santos walked up behind him. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She held a datapad in her hands, and her face was pale. "Sir, we have a problem." Danny did not turn around. He kept looking out the window at the planet below. He could see the lights of the main city, where his sister lived with her 2 children. He could see the farmlands to the north, where his parents had worked until they died. "Tell me," he said. Long-range sensors picked up a fleet. Velthari warships. 47 of them. Now Danny turned around. He took the datapad and looked at the numbers. 47 ships meant this was not a scouting mission. This was an invasion force. How long until they get here? 3 days, maybe 4. Danny handed the pad back to her. His mind was already working through the problem. New Kansas had a small defense force. 2,000 soldiers, mostly trained for police work and disaster response. They had some weapons, but nothing that could match Velthari technology. The aliens had been conquering worlds for longer than humans had been traveling through space. "Get me Admiral Price on a secure channel," he said, "and send a message to all defense commanders. Meeting in 2 hours." Maria nodded and hurried away. Danny turned back to the window. He thought about his grandmother, who had come to this world on the first colony ship. She used to tell him stories about what it was like back then. The air was thin and hard to breathe. The soil was full of chemicals that killed any plant they tried to grow. Half the colonists died in the first 10 years, but they did not give up. They built machines to clean the air. They brought bacteria that ate the poison in the soil. They worked and died, and worked some more until the world became green. Danny had been born outside, under an open sky. He was the first person in his family to take a breath without a mask. His grandmother had cried when she held him for the first time. "We made this world," she had told him. "We gave everything for it. Never let anyone take it from you." 2 hours later, Danny stood in front of 30 officers in the underground bunker. The room was plain and gray, built for function rather than comfort. A large screen on the wall showed the approaching Velthari fleet. "Here's what we know," Danny said. "The Velthari have never fought humans before. They think we are weak because we do not have natural weapons like claws or armor. They think we will run away because we are soft." He pressed a button, and the screen changed to show images of Velthari soldiers. They were tall creatures with hard shells covering their bodies. Their arms ended in sharp points that could cut through metal. They are stronger than us. They are faster than us. Their weapons are better than ours. One of the officers, a young man named Pete Crawford, raised his hand. "Sir, how are we supposed to win?" Danny smiled. It was not a happy smile. "We are not going to fight them the way they expect. We are not going to line up and shoot at each other until one side falls down. That is how they fight. That is how they have always won." He changed the screen again. This time, it showed maps of the colony, tunnels, drainage systems, abandoned buildings, forest areas. "We are going to fight like humans have always fought when we are outnumbered. We are going to hide. We are going to strike when they do not expect it. We are going to make them bleed for every step they take on our world." He looked around the room at the faces of his officers. Some of them looked scared. Some of them looked determined. All of them were listening. "I will not lie to you. Many of us will die. But our grandparents did not build this world so we could give it away. Our parents did not spend their lives making a home for us so we could run when things got hard." Danny stood up straight. His voice was firm. "They want our world. They cannot have it. Now let us get to work." The officers stood up and saluted. They had 3 days to prepare for a war no one thought they could win. It was not much time, but humans had done impossible things before. The Velthari dropships came down like metal rain. Commander Varak watched from the command ship as his soldiers landed on the plains outside the human settlement. 2,000 warriors, each one trained since birth for combat. Each one wearing armor that could stop most weapons. Each one carrying plasma rifles that could burn through stone. This would be easy, Vorak thought. The humans were primitive. They had only been traveling through space for a few hundred years. The Velthari had been conquering worlds for 10,000 years. There was no contest here. "Sir, the landing is complete," said Sub-Commander Thilik. He was younger than Vorak, eager to prove himself. "Shall we begin the assault?" Vorak looked at the human city through his viewing screen. It was small by Velthari standards. Simple buildings made of metal and concrete. A few tall structures in the center. Roads spreading out like the branches of a tree. Something was wrong. "Where are the defenders?" Vorak asked. Thilik checked his instruments. "I see no military positions. No defensive walls. No weapon emplacements." "The city appears empty, Commander," another officer added. "Thermal scans show very few life signs." Vorak's antennae twitched. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen a species simply abandon their home without a fight. Even the weakest races tried to defend themselves. "They ran away," Thilik said with disgust. "Cowards. They knew they could not win, so they fled." "Perhaps," Vorak said slowly, but he did not believe it. Something felt wrong. "Move forward. Search every building. Find where they went." The Velthari soldiers marched into the city in perfect formation. Their boots made heavy sounds on the empty streets. Their weapons were ready, but there was nothing to shoot. The buildings were dark and silent. Vehicles sat abandoned in the roads. Food was still on tables in the restaurants, as if everyone had simply vanished in the middle of their meals. Private Kevin Burke watched them from beneath a drainage grate. He was 22 years old and had never fired a weapon at a living creature before yesterday. His hands were shaking, but he forced himself to stay still. Sergeant Lisa Marsh had told him to wait for the signal. She had been very clear about that. "Do not move until you hear the explosion," she had said. "Then you shoot and you run. Do not try to be a hero. Hit them and disappear. That is how we survive this." Kevin had grown up on a farm outside the city. He knew how to hunt deer and wild pigs. His father had taught him to track animals through the forest, to move without making sound, to wait for hours for the perfect shot. This was the same thing, he told himself. Just bigger prey. The Velthory soldiers passed over his hiding spot without seeing him. Their eyes were looking forward, searching the buildings. They did not think to look down. Why would they? No civilized species hid in the dirt like an animal. 3 blocks away, Sergeant Lisa Marsh pressed a button on her communicator. The explosion was massive. A building that the Velthory scouts had marked as empty erupted in fire and metal. 30 warriors were killed instantly. Dozens more were thrown to the ground by the force of the blast. Then the shooting started. Kevin burst out of the drainage grate, fired 3 shots at the nearest group of Velthory, and dropped back down before they could turn around. His heart was pounding so hard, he thought it might break his ribs. All across the city, the same thing was happening. Humans appeared from nowhere, fired their weapons, and vanished again. They came out of walls that looked solid. They dropped from rooftops that seemed empty. They rose from holes in the ground that the Velthory had walked over a dozen times without noticing. Commander Vorak stood in the middle of the chaos, trying to understand what was happening. His soldiers were dying all around him, but he could not see the enemy. Every time one of his warriors fired at a human, the human was already gone. "Form defensive positions," he shouted. "Back to back. Cover all directions." But the humans did not attack in groups. They came one at a time from different angles, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. It was like fighting smoke. Sergeant Lisa Marsh moved through the city like a ghost. She had spent 3 days studying the streets, learning every alley and hiding spot. She knew where the shadows fell at different times of day. She knew which doors were unlocked and which walls were thin enough to hear through. She found a group of 5 Velthory soldiers who had taken cover behind an overturned vehicle. They were watching the street in front of them, waiting for an attack that would never come from that direction. Lisa climbed up the back of a nearby building using a fire escape ladder. She moved slowly, placing each foot carefully to avoid making noise. When she reached the roof, she crawled to the edge and looked down at the aliens below. 5 targets. 5 bullets. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Her hands were steady now. This was what she had trained for. The first Velthory fell before the others even knew they were being attacked. The second and third went down before anyone could react. The fourth managed to look up and see her, but by then her bullet was already flying. The fifth tried to run. He did not get far. Lisa slid back from the roof edge and disappeared into the building. By the time more Velthory arrived to investigate, she was 3 blocks away, setting up her next position. When night fell, the fighting finally stopped. The humans melted away into the darkness, leaving the Velthory to count their dead. Commander Vorak looked at the numbers and felt something he had never felt before. 400 of his warriors were dead. 400 of the finest soldiers in the galaxy, killed by farmers and builders who were supposed to be weak. The Velthory had killed 11 humans. Vorak sent a message to the High Council. His hands trembled as he wrote the words. "Request immediate reinforcements. The humans do not fight like any species we have encountered. They do not follow the rules of war. They hide like animals and strike without warning. We need more soldiers. Many more. On the other side of the city, Captain Danny Holt gathered his officers in a new location. They had moved the command center 3 times during the battle, never staying in one place long enough for the enemy to find them. "Report," he said. Lieutenant Pete Crawford looked at his datapad. "We lost 11 people today. The Valkyrie lost around 400. Danny nodded. It was a good start, but he knew it would not last. The Valkyrie would learn. They would adapt. And they would send more soldiers. "Tell everyone to rest while they can," Danny said. This was just the first day. The real fight has not even begun. Maria Santos walked up to him after the others left. "Sir, do you really think we can win this?" Danny looked out the window at the dark city. Somewhere out there, his people were hiding, waiting, preparing for tomorrow. "I do not know," he said honestly, "but I know we are not going to make it easy for them." The Valkyrie High Council did not take the news well. 5,000 more warriors were loaded onto transport ships and sent to New Kansas. Along with them came observer Kethril, a scientist who had spent 30 years studying other species. Kethril was different from most Valkyrie. He did not glow with the bright colors of a warrior. His light was soft and pale, the color of someone who spent more time thinking than fighting. When he arrived at the command camp, Commander Varak looked at him with open disgust. "I do not need scientists," Varak said. "I need soldiers who follow orders." "The High Council disagrees," Kethril replied calmly. "You have lost 400 warriors in a single day. That has never happened before. They want to know why." Varak's glow shifted to an angry orange. "The humans fight without honor. They hide and run like prey animals. They do not stand and face us like proper enemies." Kethril pulled out a small device and projected images into the air. They showed humans throughout history. Humans hunting with simple spears. Humans fighting wars with swords and shields. Humans building cities and machines and ships that crossed the stars. "Do you know how humans hunt?" Kethril asked. "I do not care how they hunt. You should." Kethril changed the image to show a human chasing an animal across a flat plain. Their ancestors did not have claws or fangs. They were not fast enough to catch prey in a sprint. So they developed a different method. They would follow an animal for hours, sometimes days. They never stopped. They never gave up. Eventually, the animal would collapse from exhaustion, and the humans would kill it. Varak stared at the image. "What is your point?" "My point is that humans do not think about war the way we do. We seek quick victories. We overwhelm our enemies with superior force. But humans think in longer terms. They are willing to lose battles if it means winning the war. They are willing to suffer and wait and endure." "Nonsense," Varak said. "They are soft creatures with no natural weapons. We simply need more soldiers." Kethril's glow dimmed with something like sadness. "I hope you are right, Commander. I truly do." The second assault began 3 days later. Varak had changed his tactics. Instead of searching buildings one at a time, he ordered his soldiers to destroy them. Massive plasma cannons reduced entire blocks to rubble. If the humans wanted to hide, he would eliminate their hiding places. Captain Danny Holt watched the destruction from a hillside outside the city. Maria Santos stood beside him, her face tight with anger. "They are burning everything," she said. "The school, the hospital, my apartment building." Danny put a hand on her shoulder. "Buildings can be rebuilt. People cannot. We need to change our approach." He called a meeting with his officers that night. They gathered in a cave system that the original colonists had used for storage during the early years of settlement. The Valkyrie did not know about these caves. They had not been on any maps the aliens captured. "The enemy is learning," Danny said. "They are destroying our cover. We cannot fight them in the city anymore. Lieutenant Pete Crawford raised his hand. Sir, if we cannot fight in the city, where do we fight? Danny pointed to a map on the wall. It showed the forests and mountains that surrounded the settlement area. We spread out. Small groups, no more than 20 people each. We hit them when they move between positions. We attack their supply lines. We make them afraid to sleep. Sergeant Lisa Marsh spoke up. She had a bandage on her forehead from a close call the day before. We do not have enough weapons for a long fight. Our ammunition will run out. Then we take theirs, Danny said. Valkyrie weapons can be modified to work with human hands. I have engineers working on it already. The new tactics began the next morning. The Valkyrie had set up a supply route between their landing zone and the occupied city. Trucks carrying food, weapons, and medical supplies traveled this route 3 times a day. They had guards, but not many. Why would they need guards? They controlled the area. Kevin Burke and his squad waited in the trees beside the road. There were 8 of them, hidden in positions that had taken them hours to prepare. Leaves and mud covered their bodies. They did not move. They barely breathed. The supply convoy appeared around a bend in the road. 2 trucks and 4 guards on foot. The Valkyrie soldiers walked with their weapons lowered, talking among themselves. They were relaxed, comfortable. They had no idea what was about to happen. Kevin aimed at the lead guard and waited for the signal. Lisa Marsh fired the first shot from her position on a small hill. The lead guard dropped. Before the others could react, the rest of the squad opened fire. In less than 10 seconds, all 4 guards were down. The trucks stopped, but there was no one to defend them. Kevin and 2 others ran forward and climbed into the vehicles. The alien controls were confusing at first, but they had practiced on captured equipment. Within a minute, both trucks were moving again, this time heading toward the human positions in the mountains. That night, Danny Holt looked at the supplies they had captured: weapons, ammunition, medical equipment. Enough to keep fighting for another week. Good work, he told Lisa when she returned to camp. Any losses? 1 wounded. Private Cooper got hit in the leg. She will be okay. Danny nodded. The enemy will increase their security after this. We need to hit more targets before they can adapt. Over the next 2 weeks, the humans struck again and again. They attacked supply convoys. They sabotaged equipment. They set traps on roads and in buildings. The Valkyrie could not move anywhere without fear of ambush. Commander Vorak lost more soldiers to these small attacks than he had lost in the initial battle. His warriors were exhausted. They could not sleep because the humans attacked at night. They could not relax because danger could come from any direction. Cathrile visited the command center and found Vorak staring at a map covered in red marks. Each mark showed where a human attack had occurred. They are everywhere, Vorak said. His voice was tired. We control the city, but we cannot control anything else. Every time we send soldiers into the wilderness, some of them do not come back. I warned you, Catherall said. The humans do not fight to win quickly. They fight to make you tired. They fight to break your spirit. Vorak turned to look at him. What do you suggest? Send a message to the council. Tell them the truth. This war will not be won with soldiers alone. We need to understand the humans better. We need to know why they fight so hard for this world. Vorak's glow shifted to a dull gray, the color of defeat. The council will not listen. They will simply send more warriors. Then more warriors will die, Catherall said, and we will be no closer to victory. In the mountains, Danny Holt sat by a small fire with his officers. They had won another day, but he knew the real test was still coming. The Valkyrie would not give up easily. They would send more soldiers, more weapons, more resources. The humans had to be ready. Get some rest, Danny told his people. Tomorrow we start training the new volunteers. More colonists had been joining the fight every day. Farmers, teachers, doctors, engineers. Regular people who had never held a weapon before. They were scared, but they were also angry. This was their home, and they would not let it go without a fight. Danny looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, more Veltari ships were on their way. He did not know how many. He did not know if his people could survive what was coming, but they would try. That was all any of them could do. Observer Kethrel could not sleep. Every night he lay in his quarters and thought about the humans. Every day he watched more Veltari soldiers die fighting an enemy they did not understand. The war had been going on for 3 months now, and there was no end in sight. He had studied humans before coming to this world. He had watched their broadcasts, read their books, analyzed their history. But none of that had prepared him for the reality of fighting them. These were not the weak, soft creatures the Council had described. These were something else entirely. Something dangerous. Kethrel made a decision. He would go to the humans himself. He would talk to them. Maybe, if he could understand them, he could find a way to end this war before both sides destroyed each other. He sent a message under a flag of truce. To his surprise, the humans agreed to meet. The meeting place was an old warehouse between the human and Veltari lines. It had been hit by weapons fire many times, and holes in the roof let in the afternoon sunlight. Kethrel arrived first and waited, his glow dim with nervousness. Captain Danny Holt came alone. He walked into the warehouse with his hands visible, showing he carried no weapons. He was thinner than Kethrel had expected, with dark circles under his eyes from too many nights without sleep. But his eyes were sharp and alert, watching everything. "You wanted to talk," Danny said. "So talk." Kethrel studied the human for a long moment. This man had killed hundreds of Veltari warriors. He had turned a simple colony defense force into an army that had stopped the mightiest military in the galaxy. And yet he looked like he could be anyone. A farmer, a teacher, a father. "I do not understand your species," Kethrel said finally. "I have studied you for 30 years, and I still do not understand." Danny sat down on a broken crate. "What is there to understand?" "This world." Kethrel gestured around them. "It is not your home planet. Your species evolved somewhere else. You came here only 3 generations ago. Why do you fight so hard for it?" Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a dried flower, pressed flat and preserved in clear plastic. "My grandmother gave this to me when I was a boy," Danny said. "She found it growing wild near the first settlement, about 50 years after the colony started. It was the first flower that grew naturally on this world. Not planted, not engineered. Just a seed that found its way into the soil and decided to grow." He held up the flower so Kethrel could see it. It was small and blue, with 5 petals arranged in a simple pattern. Do you know what she told me? She said that when she saw this flower, she cried. She had spent her whole life trying to make this world livable. She had buried her husband and 2 children who died from the harsh conditions. She had worked every day until her body broke down. And then one morning she walked outside and saw this flower, and she knew it had all been worth it. Danny put the flower back in his pocket. "That is why we fight. Not because this world is our home planet, but because we made it our home. We earned it. Every tree, every field, every building was put here by people who sacrificed everything." Kethrel's glow shifted to a soft purple, the color of deep thought. "But you cannot win. The Council will send more ships, more soldiers. Eventually, your numbers will be too small to continue." "Maybe," Danny admitted. "But we will keep fighting anyway. Why? Why die for a world you cannot keep?" Danny stood up and walked to one of the holes in the wall. He looked out at the ruined city beyond. "Let me tell you a story," he said. "About 200 years ago, back on Earth, there was a small group of soldiers defending a mission building called the Alamo. They were outnumbered 10 to 1. They had no hope of winning. They could have retreated and saved themselves. What happened to them? They stayed. They fought. They all died." Danny turned to face Kethrol. But their sacrifice inspired others. More people joined the fight. And in the end, their side won the war. "You would die just to inspire others?" Danny shook his head. "No, I would die because running away is not who we are. Humans do not give up. We do not surrender. Even when we know we cannot win, we keep fighting because that is what makes us human." Kethrol was silent for a long time. His glow shifted through several colors as he processed what he had heard. "I thought humans were weak because you have no natural weapons," he said finally. "But I was wrong. Your weapon is something else. It is your refusal to accept defeat. It is your willingness to sacrifice everything for something you believe in." "Now you understand," Danny said. Kethrol moved toward the door, then stopped. "I will make a report to the council. I will tell them what I have learned. I do not know if they will listen, but I will try." "Why? Why help us?" The alien turned back, his glow a pale shade that Danny could not read. "Because this war is wrong. The Velthari have conquered many species, but we have never faced anyone like you. If we continue this fight, we will win eventually. But the cost will be enormous. I'm not sure victory is worth that cost." After Kethrol left, Danny stood alone in the warehouse for a long time. He did not know if the alien would really help them. He did not know if anything would change. But for the first time in months, he felt something like hope. He returned to his camp in the mountains and called a meeting with his officers. "The Velthari Observer wants to negotiate peace," he told them. "But I do not think the council will agree. We need to prepare for the worst." Lieutenant Pete Crawford looked worried. "Sir, our supplies are running low again, and the enemy has learned to protect their convoys better. We cannot steal from them like we used to." "I know." Danny pulled up a map on his display. "That is why we are going to try something new. We are going to attack their main base." The room went silent. Maria Santos spoke first. "Sir, that is suicide. They have 20,000 soldiers there." "Not a direct attack," Danny said. "A raid, quick in and out. We destroy their supply storage and retreat before they can respond." Lisa Marsh studied the map. "It could work. If we time it right, we could cause serious damage. We will need volunteers," Danny said. "This mission is dangerous. I will not order anyone to go." He looked around the room at the faces of his officers. They were tired, wounded, scared, but not one of them looked away. "I will go," Lisa said. "Me too," added Tevin. One by one, every officer in the room volunteered. Danny felt a warmth in his chest. These people had followed him through impossible odds. They had lost friends and family. They had seen their homes destroyed. And still, they were willing to fight. "All right," he said. "Let us plan this carefully. We only get one chance." The raid was set for 3 nights later. 50 of the best human fighters would strike the Velthari base, destroy what they could, and escape into the darkness. It was a desperate plan, but they were in a desperate situation. Danny spent the night before the attack writing letters to the families of his soldiers. If things went wrong, he wanted them to know how brave their loved ones had been. He hoped he would not have to send those letters. But he prepared them anyway. That was what leaders did. The raid on the Velthari base changed everything. 50 human soldiers moved through the darkness like shadows. They had painted their faces and covered their equipment to prevent any reflection. Lisa Marsh led the way, finding paths through the enemy defenses that no one thought existed. The Velthari had built their base on flat ground, thinking it was easier to defend. They were wrong. The flatness meant there was no high ground for lookouts. The darkness meant their thermal sensors could not tell the difference between humans and the warm rocks around them. The humans reached the supply depot without being detected. Kevin Burke and his team planted explosives on the fuel tanks. Another team targeted the ammunition storage. A third group went after the communication equipment at exactly midnight. The charges went off. The explosions lit up the night sky. Fuel tanks burst into flames that rose 100 meters into the air. Ammunition cooked off in chains of smaller explosions that lasted for hours. The communication tower fell and crushed a row of transport vehicles in the chaos. The humans disappeared back into the wilderness. The Velthari lost more supplies in that single night than they had lost in the entire war so far. Commander Vorak stood in the ruins the next morning, his glow a dull gray of despair. How? He asked no one in particular. How do they keep doing this? Kethril watched from a distance. He had sent his report to the council 3 days ago. He had told them the truth about the humans. He had recommended withdrawal. As expected, they had ignored him. Now, they were sending more soldiers. 100,000 this time. The largest invasion force in Velthari history. When the new forces arrived, the war entered a new phase. The Velthari spread across the entire colony, occupying every city and town. They set up checkpoints on every road. They patrolled the forests with drones and sensors. It did not matter. The humans kept fighting. They fought in the cities, using tunnels and hidden rooms that the Velthari never found. They fought in the forests, using knowledge of the land that the aliens could not match. They fought in space, where colonists had converted mining ships into makeshift warships that struck Velthari supply lines and escaped before anyone could respond. Private Kevin Burke died 6 months into the war. He was holding a bridge while civilians escaped from an occupied town. 20 Velthari soldiers came at him, and he stopped them all. His body was found the next day, still holding his weapon, surrounded by dead enemies. His last radio transmission was simple. Tell my mom I did not run. Sergeant Lisa Marsh lost her arm to a plasma blast during a rescue mission. She spent 3 days in a hidden hospital, then demanded to return to combat. The doctors gave her a simple mechanical replacement. She named it Payback and went right back to fighting. Lieutenant Maria Santos coordinated the orbital defense until the station she was on was destroyed by Velthari warships. She ejected an escape pod and floated in space for 2 days before a patrol ship found her. When they brought her aboard, her first words were, "What did I miss? Are we still winning?" Captain Danny Holt never stopped leading. He never stopped fighting. He moved from camp to camp, always one step ahead of the enemy. He planned attacks that seemed impossible and won battles that should have been losses. The Velthari put a bounty on his head worth more than most planets. He did not care. There was work to do. The war lasted 2 years. 2 years of blood and fire and death. The Velthari sent wave after wave of soldiers, and the humans cut them down. Not because the humans were stronger, not because they had better weapons, but because they simply would not stop. Observer Kethril watched it all. He documented every battle, every tactic, every moment of human stubbornness. He sent report after report to the council, begging them to reconsider. Finally, after 2 years, they listened. High Arbiter Zoltan called an emergency session of the council. His glow was dim, almost invisible. He looked old in a way that Velthari rarely showed. "We sent our finest warriors to defeat the humans," he announced to the gathered representatives. None of them returned victorious. Many did not return at all. He displayed the casualty numbers. 60,000 Velthari soldiers dead. Another 40,000 wounded too badly to fight. The greatest military force in the galaxy had been broken against 8 million farmers and builders who refused to give up their home. I move that we seek terms of peace with the human colonies. Zoltan continued, not as conquerors, but as equals. The vote was unanimous. When the news reached New Kansas, Danny Holt was sitting in a cave that had served as his command center for the past 6 months. Lisa Marsh brought him the message, her mechanical arm clicking softly as she moved. "They are surrendering," she said. "The Velthari want peace." Danny read the message 3 times before he believed it. Then he put his head in his hands and cried. He cried for all the people they had lost. He cried for all the destruction they had suffered. He cried because it was finally over. The peace ceremony took place a month later, in the ruins of the colony's original capital. Velthari representatives came under a flag of truce and met with human leaders. They signed documents promising never to attack human worlds again. They agreed to pay compensation for the damage they had caused. Kethrol was there as an observer. After the ceremony, he approached Danny Holt. "I want to understand something," Kethrol said. "You were always outnumbered. You were always outgunned. At any point, you could have surrendered and saved thousands of lives. Why did you keep fighting?" Danny looked at him for a long moment. Then he pointed to a spot across the ruined square. Workers were there, clearing debris. In the middle of the destruction, someone had planted a small tree. It was barely more than a sapling, thin and fragile. "You see that tree?" Danny said. Someone planted it while the fighting was still going on. While buildings were burning and people were dying, someone took the time to put a seed in the ground. Kethrol looked at the tree. "Why?" "Because that is who we are. We build. We grow. We make things better. Even in the worst times, we plant trees we might never sit under. Even when everything is falling apart, we think about the future." Danny turned back to the alien. "You asked why we kept fighting. That is why. Because giving up means giving up on the future. And humans never give up on the future." Kethrol was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, his glow shifted to a warm yellow, the Velthari color of respect. "I think," he said, "that the galaxy has much to learn from your species." Danny smiled. It was a tired smile, but a real one. "Maybe, or maybe we just need to learn to plant more trees." 5 years later, New Kansas was thriving again. The cities had been rebuilt, bigger and better than before. The forests had regrown. Children played in streets that had once been battlefields. Captain Danny Holt, now retired, stood in a park in the center of the capital. The tree that had been planted during the war was tall now, providing shade for a memorial to those who had died. His granddaughter ran up to him, laughing. She was 5 years old, born after the war ended. She had never known fear or hunger or the sound of explosions. "Grandpa, tell me the story again," she said. "The one about how we won." Danny picked her up and held her close. He looked at the tree, at the memorial, at the peaceful sky above. "Once upon a time," he said, "some very powerful aliens came to take our home. They thought we would be easy to beat because we were small and had no claws or armor. But they were wrong," his granddaughter said, having heard this story many times before. "Yes, they were wrong, because they did not understand the most important thing about humans." "What is that?" Danny smiled and pointed at the tree. "We never give up. No matter how hard things get, no matter how impossible it seems, we keep fighting. We keep building. We keep planting trees." His granddaughter nodded seriously, as if this was the most important lesson in the world. Maybe it was Dot in the distance. A Velthari trade ship passed overhead, one of many that now visited human worlds in peace. The war was over. The future had begun, and the tree kept growing toward the sky.